Before there was a shelf for us in bookstores, before there were syllabi that even hinted at our genius, before there were book clubs singing our praises, Black women were writing. Not just writing, but daring to imagine, record, and reimagine the world through their pens. We come from a legacy of master storytellers, from women who use language to preserve legacy and shape realities, who etch themselves, and therefore us, into history with every word, who refused to be silenced and instead wrote us into being. Welcome back to Creative Birthright. Today, we are honoring 3 trailblazers who cracked open the literary world and let our voices pour through. Phillis Wheatley, Octavia Butler, and Toni Cade Bambara. And while I will focus on these 3 women today, they represent a literary legacy of hundreds and thousands of Black women writers whose stories, some of which are known and others are still unknown and ready to be discovered and told. All right, let's dive in. Phillis Wheatley was only around 7 years old when she was kidnapped from West Africa, human trafficked across the Atlantic, and enslaved in Boston. Sold into the Wheatley family, she was named after the ship that brought her across the Atlantic, the Phillis. And now that I'm sharing this, I wish I had done a little bit more research around what her name was before her enslavement, because I want to honor that as well. So if I do find it, I will put it on the screen. If I don't find it, it won't be on the screen, but if you know it, please let me know in the comments below. But back to her story. Phillis was writing in an era when it was illegal to learn how to read as an enslaved person. She defied every barrier. By 12, she was fluent in Latin and Greek. By 20, she became the first African American man or woman to publish a book of poetry, poems on various subjects, religious and moral. But to get her work published, she had to prove to a panel of white men, governors, ministers, merchants. Some of them were probably slave owners, but she had to prove to them that she had indeed written it. Imagine that. Your genius put on trial. You succeeding against impossible odds and doing something remarkable, and then having to prove that you did it. But she didn't let that stop her. Her writing was elegant, devout, and deeply subversive. Her literacy in making the decision to write was radical. While her poems praised virtue and God, embedded in them were clear indictments of slavery's hypocrisy and brutality. She used the language of her oppressor to indict the entire system. Phillis was writing under constant scrutiny, forced to defend her intellect in court just to be published, but she remained unyielding. She never stopped writing, even though she lived in a world that denied her literacy, her humanity, her agency. She wrote anyway. She claimed her creative birthright under the heaviest of chains. And her words were her freedom, her liberation. Her legacy reminds us that writing can be rebellion. And people may question your voice. Institutions may ignore it. But your creativity doesn't need permission. Phillis didn't wait to be welcomed. She didn't wait until it was legal for her to be able to read and write. She wrote herself into history. And I keep telling myself, if Phillis can write while enslaved, I have no excuse. Like, creativity doesn't need perfect conditions, and her story is the perfect testament of that. All it needs is honesty and the courage to keep going. And if Phillis could find the courage to write, we literally have no reason to not reclaim our creative birthright. Octavia Estelle Butler grew up shy introverted, and imaginative. Books became her sanctuary. But when she searched for herself in the pages of science fiction, she found only absence. So she filled the void. Despite battling dyslexia and persistent rejection, Butler wrote relentlessly, rising before dawn to draft her visions. She worked as a dishwasher and a telemarketer to support her writing. She didn't give up. She often said, "You don't start writing out good stuff. You start writing out crap and you get better." And that's what she did. She persisted until she didn't just get better, she became one of the best. Octavia's genius is in her ability to blend speculative fiction with social reality. Some might even call her a prophet. If you read the Parable of the Sower series and then you look at what's happening right now, you might also start calling her a prophet. And her work wasn't just escapism, it was confrontation. And while many science fiction works completely wrote out Black people, she asked, what happens to Black people in the apocalypse? What does it mean to evolve in the face of violence? What happens when power is mutable, shifting, and not always benevolent? Kindred pulled a modern Black woman back into slavery, not for fantasy, but for reckoning. Parable of the Sower warned us of ecological collapse and political authoritarianism long before the headlines caught up. And Fledgling, one of my personal favorites, redefined the vampire myth through the lens of race, consent, and survival. Octavia was a seer, a builder of futures where Black women not only exist, but lead, evolve, and survive. And Octavia Butler reminds me of myself in so many ways because I was also a tall, shy, bookish child with tons of imagination. I would get lost in books, and I would also get in trouble for reading books too late into the night. But one of the things I also kept coming up against was none of the stories reflected myself until I found Octavia's work. And that's when I fell so deeply in love with science fiction because I was finally able to see myself. And for that, I will always love Octavia. And she teaches us not to wait for the space, but to make it. Octavia invented stories where Black girls could be heroes, prophets, and shapeshifters. She didn't wait to be invited into science fiction. She kicked open the door and built her own galaxy. And I'm so happy to be able to live in her world. She once said, "I wrote myself in because I'm me. I'm here and I'm writing. So let your truth guide your pen, even if no one's done it before, because sometimes the act of imagining is the first step towards freedom and liberation." Toni Cade Bambara wasn't just a writer. She was a cultural force, an organizer, a teacher, a filmmaker, a radical spirit who lived in service of Black liberation. Born in Harlem in 1939, she took on the name Bambara after discovering it in a West African history book, choosing a name that reflected her commitment to the African diaspora and her African heritage. Her work didn't beg for acceptance by white institutions. It wasn't crafted to explain Black life. It was rooted in it. Gorilla My Love, her iconic short story collection, captured the voices of Black children, women, and neighborhoods with clarity, humor, and fire. The Salt Eaters, her genre-defying novel, mixed politics, healing, and spirit work, asking us what happens when we try to fight for the world but forget to heal ourselves. Toni wrote in a way that made you feel like she was sitting beside you, telling you the truth straight, but always with love. She believed stories should not just entertain, but empower. And her storytelling was always in conversation with community, always a tool for collective memory, for dreaming. Toni wrote in the voices of the people she came from, grandmas, aunties, little girls with big mouths. She showed that how we speak, laugh, and love is literature. She made storytelling a revolution, showing us that your creativity is not neutral. It's a tool, a weapon, a balm. And Bambara didn't believe in art for art's sake. She believed in art that heals, connects, and frees. She taught us that creativity and community are not separate, that the page can be a place of resistance, and that writing, when rooted in truth, can be a kind of medicine and a tool for liberation. And I would be remiss if I did not honor my literary lineage, because as much as I honor the literary giants, beyond the ones that I just mentioned today, but as much as I honor those whose names are etched in books and syllabi, the women who most shaped my voice aren't published authors or Pulitzer Prize winners, but I come from a long line of writers and storytellers. They taught me the power of words and how to use my words to shape my reality, to tell my story, and to protect myself when needed. They taught me how to use my words to weave beautiful realities and speak my innermost desires into existence. They reminded me that the spoken word is a spell, and that every time I write, I'm conjuring possibility. My mother taught me how to speak life, how to declare things into being with nothing but breath and my faith. My grandmother taught me how to listen, to hear the spaces between the words. And my great-grandmother, she was a force. She could speak life into any situation. But trust me, if you got on her bad side, her words would cut. And she would do it in such a way that it would take you a couple of days to fully understand the impact of her words. Like, she would cuss you out and you would be sitting there thinking like, what's happening right now? And later it will hit you like, oh, I just got cussed out. But that is just a testament to how masterful she was with her words, how she could weave words together in such a way that she would get her point across and you might get your feelings hurt. Her stories weren't written, but they live in my body and bone, and I carry the stories of all of my mothers with me. So even if you never publish a book, sell a painting, or produce a film, your creativity can change generations. I write not just to be heard, but to honor those who taught me how to speak, how to tell my truth, and build worlds and shape reality with language. Phillis Wheatley carved a path to freedom with her pen. Octavia Butler reimagined the future and made Black girls its prophets. Toni Cade Bambara made storytelling a revolution. So if you have a story on your heart and you're wondering if it matters, it does. If you're afraid your voice is too different, too much, too raw, don't listen to that, because it's exactly what we need. This is your literary legacy, your creative birthright. That's all I have for you today, but let me know in the comments below how you plan to honor this legacy. What story will you tell? And you don't have to be a writer to be a storyteller. Whatever creative medium you feel drawn to can be the vehicle for your story. So share your story with me in the comments below, and make sure you hit the like button on the way out. And if you made it to the end of the video but you aren't subscribed, what are you waiting for? All right, I will see you in the next video.